All right. So we're live. Let's do the setup now. We are live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. So I'm gonna check, make sure everything's working real quick. And I got some. So this is not a. I wish this was going to be a happy video. I wish. Um, we've had a hell of a 2 days, 3 days here in Israel, and there's a few things that are happening. A few things that are going to happen in the coming days and weeks. And there's a lot of people who've been reaching out to me asking how we're doing. So I want to kind of give you the story of what's actually happening here on the ground in Israel. What the news is not telling you, and both from the micro and the macro level, and as well as what I think is going to be happening um, in the coming months here. I'll just set myself up here. I think I'm live on Facebook. If you're live on Facebook, I'd love to see you leave that in the comments here. Here we go. Nope, it's working. I see myself on Facebook. Pretty cool. All right, cool. I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. Let's do this. So let's talk about this. I'll kind of tell you a little bit about our story, what happened with us, kind of in the day to day leading up to things a few days ago. Thank God. I am not an IDF soldier, so I was not called up, but I have very close friends as well as close family members. My wife has two brothers who are now on the front lines. My brother-in-law is on the front lines, who are going to be coming up. Israel has called up 300,000 reservists, which is the most it has ever called up. There is about to be a major, major war in Gaza. So it's important to understand kind of what's coming, but it's also really important to understand what's happened, to understand the justification, because there's going to be a game that is going to be played by the Western media, one which I do not think they're going to win this time, and I'll explain to you why. But it's important to understand what happened. So this past Saturday was the last day here in Israel, in America, and outside of Israel. It was going into Sunday as well, of a week-long holiday called Sukkot. It's basically kind of the culmination of the Jewish holidays, starting really from Rosh Hashanah, even a little bit earlier than that, kind of generally going through the month of September and part of October. And the final day is really kind of a celebration where we get into the synagogue and we celebrate with the Torahs inside of the synagogue. It's a very, very joyous day, joyous holiday. And I woke up. Generally, the prayers start about 7:45 in the morning, and so about 6:45, I was essentially woken to the sound of booms. My wife as well. We started to hear all these booms, and kind of initially you don't think twice about it, but all of a sudden they start coming fast and furious. And we're like, are those rockets? And what was happening, we didn't know at the time, was that Hamas had basically launched thousands of rockets in a very, very short span of time. And I'll get to kind of what their strategy was and what they were doing shortly. But we knew something was going on. One of the things that happened in this time is we don't look at our phones. We don't read the news. We're disconnected. But from this is part of kind of generally what we do with our holidays. Which is sometimes which is usually very much a relief, but sometimes it can be a bit concerning when you have incidents like this one. So what happened was I got up and we knew Hamas was firing rockets. That was obvious, and we knew they were firing a lot of rockets. And our kind of assumption was that this was going to be the launch of a similar style of war that Hamas has launched in the past, where they were going to start firing rockets at Israeli cities, which at the time was kind of odd because I stay very on top of what's going on. I hadn't heard anything about there being escalation. I had heard maybe there was going to be something up north, but I hadn't heard anything about any type of potential risk or escalation, or risk or anything like that. So I was kind of a bit surprised by all of that. I arrive at the synagogue, and the rabbi and the synagogue leadership are outside talking to one of the local security officers, who's basically explaining that kind of the protocol, what you should do in terms of leading everything today. So what's important to know is until this point, there had not been any sirens where I live. I live in a town called Beit Shemesh. There had been no sirens at this point. So we knew they were happening in other areas, both north and south of us, but they weren't actually being directed at us. I actually kind of joke that Beit Shemesh is kind of a flyover city, because usually the rockets aren't actually aimed at our city. We're right between Gaza and Jerusalem, so we generally have them fly over us on the way to Jerusalem. They don't actually try to hit us in our city. And anyway, so we ended starting the prayers, and kind of the first, for those who are Jewish who understand the terminology, I'll just explain it. We started dancing the akafot, and during the first akafot, we had a siren go off, and everyone, they're dancing with the Torah. They put the Torah immediately on top of the table, and everyone gets down on the ground. About 150 people all get down on the ground, put their hands over their head, waiting for the siren to stop, because then you don't know. And really, to understand kind of practically what you're doing when this happens, is that you're not concerned that a rocket's going to hit the building. I mean, if it does, like, it's horrible, and but getting down on your head is not going to save you from that. The issue winds up being is that if a rocket hits nearby, it will cause a lot of shrapnel and other things to be thrown in lots of directions, essentially the speed of a bullet. So basically, you want to stay low to the ground, to not risk basically not getting hit by some of the shrapnel. So that's basically kind of the technique of what you do. Siren goes for about a minute and a half, and then ends. We get up and continue, and about a minute and a half later, there's another one. Right? Everyone does the same exact thing, same thing. Put the Torah on the table. Everyone gets on the floor, puts their hands over their head, waiting for it to happen. Throughout the morning, I believe it happened 6 or 7 times. Basically, what happened, kind of practically, in the synagogue in the shul, was that we basically decided we have to speed up. We have to finish the prayers and get everybody home as fast as possible. So basically, everyone was sped up, and we were home within an hour after that. So that's kind of, and throughout the day, we were hearing rockets throughout the day. There were no more sirens by us, but there were in many, many other areas. But we at this time didn't even know about what had happened down south. It was only after the holiday was over that we began to start to understand, first of all, the tragedy of what had happened down south. And I want to talk a little bit about what exactly happened, because this is actually, I think, really important to understand. This was a major failure on the part of the Israeli intelligence. But the way Hamas did it is important to understand, because it's important to understand not just technically how they actually did it on the ground for this incident, because it applies to their overall philosophy on how everything is done with them, which is impactful just on foreign policy on the macro level as well. So, the last time we had a conflict with Hamas was in about May 2021, 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. And since that time, Hamas seemed to have changed its ways. It basically was giving signals and hints to Israel that it no longer wanted to be involved in a conflict with them. In fact, they were actively working with whoever Israel government deals with this to allow Gazans to get work permits to come into Israel, to be able to work in Israel, because they can make more money working in Israel. And this went on for over a year, right? And the Israeli authorities were looking at this and being like, this is a like, they seem to be turning around. Not that they, like, you don't put your guard down and think, oh, this is over, but like, they seem to not be, like, we don't see the threat of rockets coming anytime in the near future. The fact that this was all completely done underground, completely missed by the Israeli intelligence, is, I think, a major fail. But basically, what was happening was Hamas, at this time for the past year, had been training and planning for this operation, using underground bunkers and using other things that you weren't able to see through traditional surveillance from the military. And the other thing that they did was that they designed the training for the people who were going to be doing this in a way that no one in the lower levels even knew what was actually happening. They thought they were just going to be taking part in a specific operation. They didn't understand the overall picture, so there was no way for there to be a leak that was going to get out. Now, Israel was warned about a week ago by Egypt that there was going to be a major attack from Hamas, which Israel ignored. They just simply because they didn't see the evidence or the reason for it. Now, here's what happened. Okay, here's what Hamas did. Basically, they planted false information that made the Israeli intelligence think that the major attack was going to be coming from the West Bank. So because of the holiday, most of the fighting force was deployed in the West Bank, Yehuda and Shomron, and because of the holiday, there was a skeleton crew on manning the Gaza base. Now, Hamas knew all this. This was planned to be done on this day because of all this. Now, what they did was, the first thing they did, the rockets that were being sent off were meant to act as a false flag, because the the protocol for the soldiers is that when the rockets go off, is they need to basically hide in place and wait for the rockets to stop firing before they get out and can take their positions again to be able to protect, the wherever they're protecting. And that was the moment that Hamas chose to attack the bases. So they basically were able to walk in the bases, storm the gates, break the gates down in a matter of minutes, while the soldiers inside didn't even know what was going on. Simultaneously, they had positioned drones directly above the communication towers on those bases to simultaneously take out all communication. So at that point, the entire border, which was already severely limited in terms of manpower, lost all its communication. It lost all of its communication at the same time. They were able to go in and they were able to basically slaughter all the soldiers who were manning the border, and that allowed them to then be able to bring in their jeeps, bring in their motorcycles. They brought in hang gliders as well. I'll talk about what happened at the music festival. And that allowed them to be able to go into Israeli towns. I looked at it on the map. The town of Sderot is a 7-minute walk border to the town. Right? That's how long it takes. You get on a Jeep, it's 2 minutes. Right? We're talking. That's how fast they're in to the border town. They were able to basically walk into the town, storm in, take over the town, occupy the town in a matter of in an hour. And there was no resistance whatsoever because most of the people, it was a holiday for them. They had no expectation there was going to be any conflicts or anything like that. So they were able to go in and start killing people, and most egregiously start to take hostages. That this is the first time that Hamas taken hostages. And I'll talk about kind of, I think, the global consequence of this in terms of how this is actually going to destroy the Palestinian narrative up until this point. I think this is a major strategic mistake by Hamas for their own interests. I think what's actually happening is they're being pawns being used by Iran. There's a bigger play going on here, but I'll get to that in a little bit. So what did they do? They captured civilians. They stormed into people's homes, killed people, killed husbands in front of their wives, then took their wives, raped them, gang raped them, then put them onto jeeps and trucks, took them back to Gaza as prisoners. They took mothers with their toddlers with them. And you can be sure that there is going to be a point. My guess, if I'm them, I would do this the next day or two before Gaza starts being bombarded by the IDF, to have some type of a display of the hostages they've captured. So we'll see for that. It's going to be horrific when that happens. It's very, very concerning what's going to happen right now. Israel, I believe, still does not know exactly how many hostages or everyone who was taken. It could be that they do at this point, but they definitely have not had up until the point that, from what I've understood. Now let's talk a little bit about kind of the rave that happened. So one of the things that was also happening, I don't know if this was planned by them or if this was something that they did deliberately, but there was essentially a Burning Man style rave being done in the desert. Also, again, right near the Gaza border, and these are people, they're up all night partying, and there are people from all over the world at this rave, including people who have unfortunately now been killed and kidnapped. The nationalities that have been represented that I'm aware of are German, are American, are UK, are Britain, UK, Germany, Thailand, Brazil, and there's probably many, many more of representatives who have been killed. I know the official numbers now are that 9 Americans have been killed by Hamas. Likely there were also some Americans who were taken as hostages. So this is obviously going to complicate things for a lot of governments until this point. They took them back again. Basically what they did is they took. We've all seen the videos, of the people who they put in the backs of jeeps, on the backs of motorcycles, and just drove them back to Gaza, and who are doing who knows what to them right now. There was one video. There was one. If you haven't been following me on Twitter, I've been very active on Twitter. One of the most disturbing images was there was a woman who was basically taken out of a truck, and you can clearly see the blood between her legs. She was clearly gang raped, and is now being held in Gaza for this. So this is basically kind of the background of everything that's happened up until now on the ground in Gaza, and kind of the background for everything. And I think what this is going to do from a messaging level, because this is kind of usually, I'll give you the pattern. Here's generally what happens when there's a conflict with Gaza and what's happened in the past. is because Hamas is like they're not stupid, right? They know exactly what's how to play on the emotions of the world. And what's generally happened in the past is that they fired rockets many times, thousands and thousands of rockets at kindergartens and at schools and at people's homes indiscriminately with the goal and target of killing civilians. And what they would do is simultaneously is they would launch these rockets from within the kindergartens and schools and hospitals within Gaza. Right? They would literally go to the roof of a hospital and fire rockets into Israel from there, and obviously inviting a response from Israel, and then Israel would fire back at the terrorist who's firing this rocket into Israel. And it would destroy the hospital, and Hamas would say Israel is targeting Gaza and they're targeting hospitals as humanitarian crisis. Look at all these dead children, right? Using women as human shields. The media is absolutely despicable when it comes to reporting on these cases. Historically, they've always been despicable when they report on these cases, trying to apply some type of a moral equivalence between Hamas firing rockets at Jewish civilians and Israel, and then using their own human shields, their own civilians as human shields when Israel responds back. That is a war crime, but for some reason the international community has never accepted it as a war crime. And anybody who really cares about the Arabs in Gaza should be decrying Hamas using their people in such a way. That's the only way that these people will ever be saved. I know when I was involved in the last war, we were in touch with people who were there who like they want to get out, they can't get out. In this war as well, I don't know people directly, but I know someone who's been in touch with people in Gaza. They don't agree with what Hamas is doing, right? There's nothing they can do about it, right? So to be able to look at the news and be able to see that Israel is being painted as the aggressor here is, first of all, it's a lie, and it's not helping anything. If anything, you are encouraging Hamas to be able to continue being able to use these civilians as human shields and inviting more death to them. Now, here's why I think things are going to be radically different this time. So, in the past, it's always been about the imagery. Everything's always usually about the imagery when it comes to this. Again, I work in marketing. Those of you who know me here on LinkedIn, at least, right? I'm a copywriter. I offer conversion copy as a subscription model, subscription service. I understand marketing, and I understand the visualization that comes with the messaging and the communication when you do something like this. And the problem that has always been done in the past is that you've had the imagery of firing of rockets onto towns, right? And then on the flip side, you have a Arab holding up a dead baby, right? And while the other one, mentally kind of think that's horrible, but it's also kind of like the equivalent of like some type of a Star Wars imagery. Oh, this is cool. There's a space battle going on. Like, oh, Iron Dome's gonna get out and boop boop boop. They're gonna pop them out of the air. You don't really understand the true devastation as opposed to here I am going to hold a dead baby in front of you. The difference that's happened now is now you actually have videos and pictures of Hamas taking these women, of raping them, of taking Shani Luke, I think her name is, a German citizen who was at this rave, who they gang raped and then killed her and then threw her on the back of a pickup truck and paraded her through the streets of Gaza with everyone celebrating it. That's an image, right? And in response to I don't know if it was actually directly in response to this or just the general situation. Germany, and this is very significant, Germany and the entire EU have completely suspended aid to all of the Palestinians, right? Not just the ones in Gaza, all of them. Because basically they're saying, hey, listen, they're starting to realize that all the money we've been giving you, which you've supposedly promised to use to help build up your society, have been used instead for terror, and now you're actually killing our own citizens and parading them around on social media. So Hamas is got their 10 hours of fun, and they're going to have their 10 days, weeks, months of nightmares coming to them in response to this attack. I have been very pleased to see from a thus far from the international community, from the political side, that there has been widespread condemnation for what's happening. But here's what my concern is. My concern is what's going to happen in 10 days from now. Because the pattern is generally this. The pattern is that Israel responds. Israel starts firing rockets at Hamas, right? Leveling their military infrastructure, which oftentimes happens to be housed in civilian buildings and in residential areas. And then after a certain amount of time, eventually, the Western world says enough. It's time to stop to stop firing. Now, I don't think it's going to happen this time. I actually do. I actually think it's going to be different this time. The reason why I think it's going to be different this time is because you have that imagery. You have that imagery. Like if you follow me on Twitter, you'll see some of the language I'm repeatedly using is is this this support of the killing, rape, and kidnapping of women, children, and grandmothers. Right? That's something if you think we should stop firing, that means you're allowing these people who have killed, kidnapped, and raped women, children, and grandmothers, right? You're allowing them to win. Okay, is that something you want to do? And because now we have the imagery to kind of fight back against that, I think it's going to be extremely significant. Now, this is kind of from the obviously the micro level of what's happening within Israel. On the macro level within Israel, I'm going to expand it out a little bit. This is going to be a little bit more speculative. I'll tell you what I think is actually going to happen, and what my big concern is right now. I'm very, very concerned that this is going to lead to World War III, and I'll tell you how I see it getting there from here. So Hamas is funded by Iran. I know there's many people mainly on the Republican side right now who are blaming Joe Biden for the money he released last month. It could be true. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter whether it's that money or other money. Iran's giving Hamas money. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. But where I think that the mistake that's happening, I think, from the current administration, comes down to the understanding that is up until this point they thought like, oh, these are people, like, this is a land dispute, right? We could get away with convincing people this is a land dispute. And what this has really shown, like, there was nothing here connected to land or occupation or anything like that. You attacked a group of 5,000 defenseless people from all over the world who were simply partying in the middle of the desert, right? In a coordinated attack that you spent a year planning for, right? To murder and to gang rape the women in front of their dead friends before they killed many of them, and then took them as hostages back into Gaza, right? This changes the narrative significantly for what's happened in Gaza until now, and therefore that's I think going to change in policy in many Western countries right now. And so here's my concern right now. Okay, so yes, Iran is funding Hamas. We know this. The United States right now, one of the things I also follow as well very closely is what's going on in the financial markets. And one of the things that I was seeing happen in the months kind of leading up until this, and still an issue today, is that the United States has a massive sovereign debt crisis looming, with countries basically stopping to buy their treasury bills, right? Which is basically the way that the U.S. gets money from other countries to basically pay off their own debt. So the U.S. is on track to print to add $1 trillion to the national debt this month, right? When usually it would take 3-4 months. In the last round, it used to take years to get to $1 trillion, right? It's speeding up. And one of the things that's going to be directly connected to is going to be oil prices. So Iran has to do one thing, and they've already started to hint at this, right? Is that they're going to say that because when Israel responds to Hamas in Gaza, most likely Hezbollah is going to attack in the north. There's already kind of been rumblings, although I've seen Hezbollah has not taken credit thus far for any of the activities happening on Israel's northern border. It seems to be isolated Palestinians who live up there. My reading into that is because Hezbollah is waiting to see what Israel does to Hamas before they decide what they're going to do, because I think they're scared, which is good. They should be scared. But what Iran will do is say, okay, in response to Israel attacking Hamas, what we're going to do is we're going to blockade the Straits of Hormuz. And the Straits of Hormuz is where 25% of all of the world's oil goes through. So overnight, you're talking about a massive skyrocketing oil price that's going to be, and already today Janet Yellen even said, she said that we're going to have to be putting price controls on gas. So I'm trying to preempt people for this. And once that happens, that single moment happens, you're in World War III. Like, there is literally one thing that has to happen right now until you're in World War III. So this is my big concern right now, everything that's happening, on a macro level. But again, back to kind of what's happening in Israel. What's going to be happening in the next what's going to be happening in the coming days is Israel's called up 300,000 reservists, in addition to their current reserves that are actively fighting in the army all the time. I don't know exactly what the full number is, but this is basically the largest number of reservists they've ever called up, including during the Yom Kippur War. And they are going to be and they are preparing for a massive, massive invasion of Gaza. And I think it is very likely you're going to see the stated goal is the obliteration of Hamas, and you very likely may see the retaking of the Gaza Strip after this. I don't know if that's what's going to happen, but I would not be surprised. I hope it. They will, because the biggest mistake that Israel ever made was giving the Gaza Strip away. I was in Gaza in 2005. Right, what was that? 18 years ago. I was in Gaza in one of the Jewish communities there that they ended up expelling, who had built, been beautiful communities on the beach. And they were basically said, okay, you're going to move, and we're giving these to these Arabs so that we have peace. Okay. The arguments that were happening in the Knesset between the right and the left at the time was that the right was saying, if you do that, they're going to start firing rockets, not at the communities surrounding the Gaza Strip. They're going to be firing at Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. The people on the left were saying, no, it's impossible. It's never going to happen. Right? This is what they want. This land for peace. They want peace. They want peace. So we're going to give them land. There's going to be no issues. I think it took 4 years, 3 years. 2008 was when they started firing the first rocket in Operation Cast Lead in 2008, 2009. That basically started to hit Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, and from there, that as I say, the rest is history. So the only option for Israel at this point, in response to this, is you need to get your civilians back, and you need to destroy Hamas. That is the only acceptable outcome to all this. Hamas has exposed themselves as war criminals, and the world, I believe, has woken up to this. And I'll give you a little bit of media training as well, just to understand kind of what's going to be happening in the coming days on the media side, because this is where it could not be true, although I'm starting to see already some hints of it. What I'm labeling the news sources that are the enemy. The BBC is the enemy, right? MSNBC is the enemy. MSNBC had on a guy, I saw a clip, and he's trying to justify what Hamas is doing in response to Netanyahu's radical right-wing government. It has nothing to do with Netanyahu, although it very likely could be that his government could be blamed for the failure in intelligence, although Israel's government has been in uproar for the past 5 years. Basically, we haven't had a stable government for more. This is the longest I think we've had a stable government in more than 5 years. But it could be that there very much is to blame from Netanyahu for this. But that doesn't matter. It has nothing to do with being right wing. It has to do with an intelligence failure, plain and simple. So that's one thing to watch out for. Okay, watch out for any type of moral equivalence okay, fine, we're going to try to put everyone's actions on a scale and see, are they kind of evens. Like, there is no evenness. The way that I describe this is that, people say Hamas crossed the line. Hamas did not cross the line. They crossed the line when they fired that first rocket in 2008. They are now 20,000 miles over that line. Their only option is to wipe them out. Okay, the only option is to wipe them out. And when I say, and I understand when I say wipe them out, I'll kind of talk to you technically about what that means. So you have the leadership, you have for lack of a better word, the managers, right? And then you have all the fighters, and the fighters are people who, generally they're young men who don't have much going in their life, and this gives them a sense of purpose, right? Tony Robbins talks about everyone needs to feel a sense of significance in what they're doing, and the Hamas leadership and these managers are the ones who are able to give the fighters that significance. You destroy the leadership, destroy the managers, destroy the organization, right? In every way possible, destroy all their infrastructure. Okay, and unfortunately, civilians have to die, right? Just understand like what that means. Again, nobody wants civilians to die. Particularly, we understand that many of the civilians understand that they are being oppressed by Hamas. It's a tragic, horrible thing. But when the UK was attacking Germany in 2002, in response to Germany attacking the UK and their air raids that they were doing against each other, like, some German civilians had to die. Like, this is just the reality of war. The best thing to do is to have leadership that can make sure war doesn't happen to begin with. You need to have strong leadership that will act as deterrence, to understand that the mentality of your enemies is that if you show weakness, they will take advantage of it. Okay, and unfortunately, like, there has been weakness shown that has allowed for this to happen in the worldwide leadership, and that plain and simple is the reason that this is happening. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out again. And I know a number of people have reached out to me with questions or things they want to know. Happy to answer anything that anyone's going on, or any questions anybody has that they want to know what's going on. I'm pretty well plugged into everything that's happening. I have a few um, yeah, I'll call them unofficial news sources, but they are clear for publication. I haven't said anything that has not been public knowledge. Like you want to be very careful when you're giving out information like this. You don't want to be giving out information like, oh yeah, like I have a friend who was called up to this place and they're going to be attacking the enemy on this time and whatever. Like you don't want to give away any actual information like that. But if you want to know what's going on, follow me on Twitter. Gabi Zeitlin. That's really kind of where I'm mainly focusing on the political stuff. While I continue to focus on serving my clients and running my business, and taking care of my family. Appreciate everyone's support for all this stuff. If you want me to do another one of these in the future, if you have any questions specifically, happy to do that again. And I will see all of you later. All right. Yalla.